y'all, welcome back to the Speakeasy podcast. Today it is just me and you, and we're gonna do a little catch up and tell some stories and fill in some gaps that are missing in the last year or so. So grab a cup of coffee, pop in your earbuds. We're just gonna yap. We're gonna catch up. I haven't been ready to make this episode yet. I'm pretty much gonna tell you the story of last year as much as feels appropriate. I've shared flyover. I did a whole series on what God taught me through last year. That's the Ending Well series. It's 8 episodes at the end of last year. But I genuinely just wasn't ready to tell the story of it. And there are still parts that I'm not going to tell you. I'm a really big believer in keeping personal things personal as much as you can. I think it preserves our souls as we navigate the internet space. But I just haven't been ready to lay it all out. I really needed to process through it. And I do kind of now feel like, okay, it's been easier for me to have these conversations in real life. And I figured for the people that are invested, this would be helpful to kind of make things make sense. Because if you haven't noticed, which you definitely have because it's very noticeable, my content has shifted really significantly in the last year or so. And that has been not by choice. This space, the podcasting space, has always felt like a true well-rounded extension of myself. One week we're talking about homeschooling and motherhood, and then the next we're talking about hormones and our bodies, and then we're going to talk about politics, and then we're going to talk about reading our Bibles. This has always felt the most like me, to be honest. Instagram did for probably from 2021 to 2024 was really distilled down to pretty political. I think I was offering value in other spaces for sure, but that was a bulk of the content for a multitude of reasons. There was so much going on, and it felt like that was the mission I was supposed to be running on. And even now, having pivoted out of it, it's not like I'm like, oh, I wish I would have never done any of that at all. I am thankful for it, and I see the ways that God used it. But there's always been more to me, as there is with all of us. We're also such multifaceted human beings. But I've never really explained, I don't think, how the shift came to be. I think I've given the reasons why, but I'm also kind of doing this episode for myself. I want to lay it all out and also be able to look back on this wherever God takes me and see this marker in time. Throughout this episode, you're going to hear me reference hearing from God quite a bit, because let me tell you, 2025 in all of my 37 years is the most radical year I've ever had. It's the most transformational year. It turned my life, my identity, my work, my purpose completely upside down. I'm probably going to get emotional in this episode, and I don't love that, but human being with feelings, we're going to let ourselves feel them. And so if the idea of hearing from God in whatever format feels really foreign to you, I did an entire episode on this subject. It's episode 381. It's the beginning of my Ending Well series that was at the end of last year, which is honestly, I think it's kind of cool that those 8 episodes are the fruit of what we're about to talk through. I wasn't ready to talk about what was happening, but I had this urgency, man. It was crazy. So crazy that I did 2 episodes a week at the craziest part of the year, but this urgency to express what God had done and what he had shown me and the radical ways that he had transformed my life. And so those episodes are like an Ebenezer for me. That's scripturally, the Israelites would stack stones in places where God had done great works, and they were meant to serve as reminders of what God has done. And the Ending Well series is like that for me. But as I talk about hearing from God, if you're like, what do you mean? How do you hear from God? How do I hear from God? What am I doing? I would reference you to episode 381. I think that would be really helpful as I kind of lay these pieces out. For almost all of my life, obedience to God has looked like go, do, jump. I've a lot of the time likened it to that scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where he has to walk across the bridge he can't see. There's been so much of that where my husband and I will feel God prompting us to do something that doesn't make a lot of sense, like him leaving his lucrative job that he'd been at for 20 years, or pull our children to homeschool, or start a podcast, all of these things that I couldn't really see where it was going, but it was a jump. And then he caught me, and it worked out abundantly more than I could have even expected or dreamed that it would. In the last year, it's been quite the opposite of that. It has been sit down, pull back, do less, trust me to fill the gap, trust me to actually carry you where I'm taking you rather than asking us to jump where he's taking us. And come to find out, didn't love that. Did not like that. And that's because my identity was really wrapped up in my ability to do and go and be. And so when God asked me to quiet down and trust him, I spent a really long time kind of thrashing around and not liking it and just battling with obedience, y'all. Like, it's so different. And I mean, this is a no-brainer, but I think it needs to be said. It's so different to be obedient when God's asking you to do something you want to do that even like maybe feels a little scary and you don't know how it's going to turn out, but you want to do it. It feels in your personhood like what you're wired for. And I'm just I think am a doer and a goer. And so when God was asking me to do those things, obedience was still scary, but it wasn't as hard. When he flipped the script, I don't know if I've ever battled to be obedient. And you're going to hear as I kind of lay this out, there's a lot of disobedience in 2025 that I knew. Like, I knew I was being disobedient. I knew I wasn't doing what God was asking me to do. And I couldn't. I could, obviously, but I couldn't. And that is why it really required a lot of breaking. I think one of the ways, I think we experience God in all of these really incredible ways. And one of the ways that I experienced him last year was as the great physician, and that there were some bones that needed to be broken so that he could reset them correctly. Broken bones hurt. Resetting them hurts. And so 2025 was definitely a year of pain and change that I didn't want. I in my mind was fine with the way things were until I wasn't. So really quick flyover backstory just to get us caught up to 2025. I like to call myself an internet dinosaur, okay? I have been blogging since about 2008. I started blogging like my freshman year of college. Live journal, Zanga, anyone? Yes, those were the days. So I did that for a really long time. I would take breaks and I would come back to it. And there was this like little mini following. It was purely a project of passion. But very similar to what I do today, just kind of talking about whatever God was showing me, teaching me, etc. So then I launched my podcast. I started taking Instagram seriously in 2018, which is wild that it's been that long. Like, this is the 8th year of the podcast, right? I don't know. Don't check my math. I think it is. Yeah, because I'll be 38 this year. And I launched my podcast on my 30th birthday, as it was my 30th birthday gift to myself. And by the end of 2020, by November of 2020, it was my full-time job. I was working at a local church in their communications department, and I was able to quit that job because I was making on Instagram well over what I was making in my job. And so we were like, all right, like, we're going to jump in and do this thing. And I've always been deeply political behind the scenes, like to the point where it was maybe not appropriate as young as I was to be like as into the headlines, but I've always really paid attention to like politics and culture. And there were bits and pieces of that. I'd shared some in 2016, and then honestly had, like everybody experiencing in 2020 and in 2024, people not wanting to be friends with them anymore because their political beliefs. I think I was able to help kind of usher people through that because I had already done it in 2016. But when that happened in 2016, it kind of made me like, I don't like this. I don't like the way that went. And so I'm not going to do this as much. And so I'd kind of taken a break. And then 2020, COVID hits. I got about 3 weeks into COVID until I just couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. And was like, there's something very wrong. You guys, this isn't what they're telling us. This isn't going, like the ways that they are handling this just don't track. And that really resonated with people. And then not far behind that was vaccine mandates, which were a really big deal for me. Both my father and my husband were on the line to lose their jobs. They both thankfully were able to willingly leave their jobs rather than be forced out. To a degree, it was like a choice that they had to make, but that was very intense and important to me. And so I was battling it out online, and then through the Biden administration. And I kind of said this earlier, but there was so much purpose in that season that I don't want anybody to think that because that has changed for me that I regret it, or that I think I did something wrong, or that I would go back and do something differently, or that I think that the people that are in that space now are doing something wrong. I think there is so much purpose in being political online. I do. I think that I don't know that I would go back and do it the way that I did it. And I still to this day have conversations with my friends that are in that space about the way they're doing it. And I try to encourage them to do it differently and kind of learn from my mistakes, because by the end, I was on the clock 24/7. I felt like I was serving as a filter for everyone, where I was just taking it all in, all of it. I was taking everything that was happening in the world in, and then filtering it through this, honestly, like a filter system formula that I had cultivated, and deciding and discerning what needed to be shared, what I felt like I could offer value to, and then expending immense amounts of energy, time, and discernment figuring out how to do that well, and what I could bring value to. I would sometimes kind of, with Jeremy, I would call it like I felt like a sin eater. Like I was just like, bruh, like just taking it all in and then trying to be what people needed. And because people do that, there is such a need for that. And I don't think sometimes people really understood what it required. And I'm not trying to say this in this like, woe is me, look how hard I was working and how hard things were way. I'm really not. But it was a lot. And as a result, there was sin in my life. There was sin in my life. And there were priorities that were so out of whack. And I've said this, I know I'm going to reference the Ending Well series a bunch in this. It just is what it is. I did an entire episode on, like, I thought that work was more important than raising my children. And I freaking can't tell you how much I hate saying that out loud. But it's true. I thought that work was like the most important thing that I could do, because I know that it was helping people. But that is not sustainable long term. It's not sustainable by yourself. It was literally just me. I mean, I had an assistant that worked 20 hours a month. is pretty minimal, I'm going to be honest. And so it got to a point where I like I said earlier, I realized I can't keep doing this. I was in fight or flight all day, every day. I was so checked out of my real life and so plugged into what was happening in the world that I was missing it. I was missing it. And so that kind of brings us up to like January of 2025. I'm probably working, we tallied it up. I like actually downloaded a app where you tracked your hours, and for a week, or actually a couple of weeks, I tracked my hours, and I was working like 50-hour weeks between consuming headlines, creating content, podcasting, answering DMs, answering comments, doing all of the admin work. Around July, August. Oh no, that would be 2025. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I was working way too much. And Jeremy was home. Jeremy worked from home from 2022 to 2025. And so I had a lot of help, but it was still too much. And so in January, Jeremy started having to work out of the house a little bit, like not a ton, but a couple of times a week. And that was when we really started to kind of see the weight that I was really carrying in my work. And I can remember it was January 14th to 17th. There were 12 Senate committee hearings for the Trump administration, and I was trying to cover them all. Let's also reference back to the Ending Well series where I talked about being a complete perfectionist and completely addicted to not just my work, but doing it at a level of excellence that is just completely unreasonable and unrealistic. And so there were those 12 Senate committee hearings, and I can remember having this moment at my kitchen island where I had my laptop open, my iPad open, and my iPhone, and kind of realizing that I hadn't checked in with the girls in a minute. And this was in the afternoon. Like we had already done school, we had had lunch, we had done chores, but it had been like an hour. And I just was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I remember I shut it all down. I was like in the middle of doing essentially like live coverage, and I just turned it off. And they were outside playing, and I went outside and I joined them, and I had so much grief and guilt and shame, and I'd never felt that way before. Like that was not abnormal for me to be covering something really crazy on multiple screens and be really, deep into it and invested. That was not abnormal. But what was how I felt about it. And that was really the beginning. And then January 20th, Trump's inaugurated. I'm sitting in my parents' house watching it. And I remember hearing this whisper of like, you're not going to do this for much longer. And that was not comforting to me. It was not like oh gosh, good. Like I want to get out of this. It was more of like yeah, right. I'm built for this. I'm so good at this. Hello, so much pride. Like I said, we're about to get into the part where there's a lot of disobedience and pride, and I've really questioned God multiple times on why he's having me tell this, but we're just gonna go for it. Yeah, was just like, no, essentially, which I would then continue to be a theme for a while. So then March 3rd, which we just came up on a year of, Jeremy goes back to work in an office full time. And it was a really big, like incredible thing for our family. It changed our finances. I really believe that men are hardwired for consistent work. And he had kind of gotten to the point where he was struggling with not feeling like he had enough to do or was doing enough for his family, and I think for himself as well. And so we had been, that alone, like that, his work story is a whole long story, which I think we actually did an episode on. I'll try to go back and pull that, and I'll put it in the in the notes of this, but he goes back to work full time and my world flipped upside down. I knew that he was really incredible and helpful, and I've always been so thankful for the way that he's really invested in his family and leans in and he's never been somebody that expects me to do everything or carry everything, the mental load or the physical load. And so when he was gone, I was made suddenly aware that the way that I was doing things was no longer going to work. But I wasn't like, I was aware, but I wasn't accepting of it. It was more of a, okay, well, I can figure this out. I can figure this out. I can pivot. I can outsource. I can maybe get more help. I can keep doing what I'm doing. I made it to the middle of April before I had to like take a break. Took a really long break from Instagram. Longest break I've taken and had taken in 7 years. And when I came back from that break, I felt different about myself, about my life, and about social media and about Instagram. And it was funny because there were quite a few people who would DM and be like, you seem different. Like you seem more settled. And I think it's because during that time, I began baby steps into accepting that things were going to have to change. I remember writing in my journal, like, what if what has gotten you here won't get you where God's taking you? And that, you ever have those moments where you're journaling and you're like, oh, that wasn't me. That was the Holy Spirit. I blacked out a little bit. It was kind of one of those. And so that started the process of decentralizing politics, not just from my platform, but from my life. Because this wasn't, yes, it was for my work. Like I was keeping up with everything for my work. But also, I really thought that that was the peak of human responsibility, to know everything that's happening. And around there, you can kind of see a shift in my content, maybe a little bit before that, where I started to kind of play with this idea of like, maybe not. Maybe we're not created to know every single thing that happens in the world, in our country, across the world. Maybe we actually don't. And now I like stand 10 toes down that we don't even have the nervous system infrastructure for that we are not created to know every terrible thing that happens everywhere all day. The 24/7 news cycle is killing us. It is sucking our souls directly out of our eyeballs. But that idea started to form in me and like really take shape. And in July, I remember it so vividly. Well, actually, in June, I recorded a little, just like a silly little reel. There was a trend going around at the time that was like the "you seem happier." And it was like, yeah, I da 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 da, like these things that people did. And so I recorded one kind of dancing around in the grass and was like, "You seem happier." I think I said like, yeah, I've stopped consuming every single headline and started touching grass more. Well, I made that in June and then I didn't post it for like a full month because I was just terrified. So now I'm starting to get a pretty clear picture that God is asking me to shift into a different season personally and in my work and in my content, that he's asking me to not just decentralize politics from like my personal life. If I decentralize it from my personal life, it's going to be decentralized in my content as well. And I was so scared. Like, so guys, like, you know how if you like think about a season for too long, you can start to feel it in your body. I can like feel the like, like come up when I think about it. And it felt like if I posted that video, if I posted that reel, that was going to be, that I was going to actually have to be obedient, because I was just outright being disobedient. The prompting was there. Pull back, tangibly, like spend less time on X. You are not prioritizing your children and your home the way that you need to be. Things have to change. I was getting that from God in my time in the Word, in my time in worship, in conversation with other people, in things that I was reading, but I was so resistant to it. And so I would say May through November, October, November were some of the hardest months of my life. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but now I look back and it's like, yeah, because you were being crazy disobedient, babe. You're being crazy disobedient. And so July I posted it, super well received, went really well, like wasn't near, I was still really scared when I posted it. But then we hit August. August is like the lynchpin for 2025. There was a lot going on behind the scenes, like a lot. Taking a quick break from story time to remind you about CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is an health insurance alternative that is changing the game. I actually had the CEO of CrowdHealth on the podcast, the first episode of this year, to talk about how broken the system is and how it keeps people victimized and not getting the help that they need and not even able to use the resources that they really want to use. And that is why CrowdHealth is such a great alternative option. Pretty much the way it works is you pay a monthly fee, and with that, you get access to so much. You get access to lower prescriptions, lower cost labs. You get a list of vetted doctors. You get a team of people that is going to negotiate your bills. And then if something does happen, you pay the first $500, and then CrowdHealth or the crowd steps in and covers the rest of it. And so it's a great option that kind of gives you the options like before we had Obamacare, where you can actually do what you want to do with your health insurance. So you can join CrowdHealth to get started for $99 for your first 3 months by using the code Speakeasy when you go to joincrowdhealth.com. That is joincrowdhealth.com, code Speakeasy. And just remember, CrowdHealth is not insurance, it's an alternative, but you can opt out of the system and take your power back. I don't really feel comfortable sharing, I'm gonna be honest. But the structure of my life was changing. The people that were in my life was changing really radically. Who I could rely on was changing. And I was August is kind of isolated in a lot of loneliness. I mean, I had my husband and he's so wonderful and I'm so thankful for him, and I couldn't have made it through any of this without him. But there were just other things in my life that were falling apart, and I was falling apart because my identity, when I look back at it, I think August was kind of when God got to the point of, okay, like I've given you time to get on board with what I've asked you of, like Jonah. It was my Jonah moment. It was all right, you're going in the belly of the whale. You don't want to be obedient. You don't want to go where I'm asking you to go. You don't want to do what I'm asking you to do. You're going in the belly of the whale. And the belly of the whale sucks. It's lonely and it's dark and it's scary. And now you don't know where you're going and you don't have any control over where you're going because the whale is in control of where you're going. And I actually, in preparation for this episode, went back and looked at some of my content. You know, you can like see your story archive, and I can see it in my face that I was just not okay. And it, like I said, it was because my identity was being completely picked apart, and God was asking me to lay things down that were completely like embedded, like they were under my skin. They had become so much of me. And August 23rd, I was out for a walk, and I referenced this in the Ending Well episode about hearing God, but God, I have visions. I know that it's 2026 and people still get a little like uncomfortable about the idea of visions. They're mostly for me, and they're not like prophetic. Like I don't see the future or anything, but I have always been so visual. I'm a visual learner. I see things in pictures, and if I can't, then I can't really conceptualize it. And God knows that. He made me that way. And so as my relationship with the Lord has grown, my ability to see what he's trying to show me has grown, and that has accelerated my relationship with him so significantly, especially when I stopped tiptoeing around it. Like for a really long time, I would have visions of God showing me what he wanted me to do or where he was taking me or explaining something that was happening in real time. And I would bury it because thought it was weird. I thought it was weird, even though it's like so scriptural. And I think I've always thought it was so cool when other people have that experience, but it's like it was weird for me. But I'm not there anymore, so we're gonna talk about it. So I was out for a walk and I'm in it, right? Like I'm struggling, things are dark, and I have always, I would say always, viewed myself as a warrior. Whether that was a warrior of my own right or once I became a child of God, a warrior in his army. And I think that is a part that we all play. I think it's a part of what God asks us to do. I mean, we armor up with the armor of God, and we fight battles and we run races. And there's definitely language around that in scripture. And so that was, but that was fully how I saw my identity in Christ. And what God had been doing leading up to this vision was trying to show me that isn't the whole picture. And so I'm walking in my neighborhood and I'm listening to worship music, and a song comes on, and I drop into a vision, and it was kind of wild. Like I almost like couldn't really see what was actually around me, and my eyes were open, but I was standing. This part I probably am gonna get emotional. I hate that. I was standing in like a big throne room, and I'm in full armor, and I'm standing in front of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit on thrones, on like a dais, and I'm singing this song at the top of my lungs in the vision, and I am beaten up. Like my armor is dented, my face is bruised, my hair is all like scraggly. I am like fresh out of battle. And I sing this song to God about how powerful he is and how beautiful his name is. And then, like, yes, God will even control our playlists. The next song that comes on is That's My King by CeCe Winans. And the room fills with people. And I could feel in my spirit that these were people that my like online journey thus far had an impact on. And I felt the Spirit be like, look around. Shoot, guys. Like, look around. Like, see that the work that you have done thus far matters. And that song ends, and everybody kind of vanishes, and it's just me and them in the room. And God like beckons me close to the throne. And he was like, I want you to take off your armor. And in my head, I'm like, this is the armor of God. Like, no, I need to like leave it on. And he's like, no, that's your armor. That's your armor. Because yes, like you are a warrior, and yes, you need to like wear the armor of God. But before you are any of those things, you're my daughter. And you don't know how to just be a daughter. And it's time for you to learn. And I did some digging. I love, like ancient times, King Arthur, all that kind of stuff. It's probably my favorite time period. And I did some digging after the fact and looked into that, like when soldiers came home from war, there would be this like decommissioning, and it was a celebration before soldiers, embedded into their lives again and joined their families at tables and rested and, lived a bit of like, the civilian life. And that moment and that vision changed everything for me, because I was forced to really face and acknowledge that I did not know how to be a daughter. I knew how to fight. I knew how to fight other people's battles. I knew how to fight my own battles. I knew how to fight with people and for people, but I did not know how to rest. I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to trust God. I clearly didn't know how to be obedient. And so a couple of days after that, I was really, really addicted to X. I was like, that was like, I was checking every news source and then kind of filtering it all through X. And I took it to Jeremy and was like, I don't have self-control around this. And so I asked him to just like change my password so that I couldn't get on it. And my plan was to do that for a month. Well, 3 weeks later, Charlie Kirk dies. And that was just devastating. And I'm not going to like spend a whole bunch of time on that, but it was pivotal for me, because when I look back at how I responded publicly to Charlie's death, it was the first, getting off of X was the first private step of obedience. Responding to Charlie's death the way I did publicly was my first public step of obedience. If he had died 2 months earlier, my response to it would have been completely different. It would have been largely politically charged. I would have leaned into like that part of it. But instead, all I could really do was like tend to revival and point people to Jesus, because that's what I was doing behind the scenes. And that was August was the lynchpin. September was when things really started to change. It was like August, God, I feel this like inclination to say he got sick of me, but I don't think God gets sick of us. But I do think that he will stop letting us delay his plans. And September, it started to be put in motion. And it was like the sun started to come up in September, and the darkness started to fade, and the fear started to fade away. I missed a really important point, and instead of editing this, I'm just going to go back because that's okay. Right before I had that vision, like of the kind of like decommissioning, there was a moment where I was standing at my stove and the house was empty, which never happens. Hello, homeschool family. And I felt in my bones God say, I want you to put the politics down. And I out loud in my empty house said, no. And then I was immediately filled with like just straight up fear. Like, where am I that I am telling God no? How did I get here? I don't want to be here. I don't want to be this person. It was terrifying. I think I like sat on the kitchen floor and was like, just immediately like repented, and then asked for the strength to do what he was asking me to do. And then a couple of days later had that vision, and that really got the ball started. And I think our expectation when we do something like that is that God's going to like smite us, right? Like, oh my gosh, you told God no when he asked you to do something, like did lightning come out of the sky? No. If I would have said no and stuck with that no, I think there would have just been natural consequences. I was already living and experiencing the natural consequences. I was so depressed. I was so anxious. I was so unwell. And a majority of that, I would say it was a dual fear. It was like two fears that were wrapped up together. And it was, who am I if I'm not doing this work? And will my platform sustain itself if I'm not still doing this work? And this is a platform that I've poured into for 8 9 years at this point that I love the work of, and that, yes, like provides some income that is really beneficial to my family. And so it was an identity fear and a like what's going to happen fear. And so in September, responding to Charlie's death the way that I did and really beginning, I think I only posted like 2 or 3 explicitly, maybe even less than that. It may have been like 2 explicitly political things in September, and seeing that like it didn't fall apart, that people were receptive to that. Now, what I didn't really understand at the time is that there was a clear shift beginning to happen. And that is such a trend in my online like career, if you will, is that God has consistently like kept me ahead of these waves where I'll be doing one thing and then I'll feel like he's asking me to pivot and I'll pivot, and the next thing you know, the industry changes completely or falls apart or gets replaced. And so I didn't realize that at the time, but the ball was really starting to roll for people at that time of like the political fatigue was getting very real. I would say by summer, people were really starting to like be done. And I didn't even have eyes to see it at the time that, my political content was performing less and less, like still well, but the numbers were dropping. And so if we get to October, I started therapy. I started somatic healing therapy, which is really interesting work that I believe in wholeheartedly. I mean, you can Google it. It's I think you could sum it up by saying that we need more than just talk therapy, that our bodies need to be involved in the situation and in the experience. And so in October, I started somatic therapy and I got more help behind the scenes. I brought on a really, really incredible assistant who, my previous one was doing 20 hours a month. She does 20 hours a week. That is also like a huge part of this, is that I just needed help. And so part of it was I didn't know how to ask for it and I didn't know how to find it. And I also like didn't know how to trust somebody to take things that I felt like I needed to have ownership of. But the radical shifts, you guys, from October to now, but I would say like October to December was when the sun started to rise, like I said, and I started to walk out of the wilderness, and I started to have less fear, and I started to be more rooted in my life. And that was when the change, I think, became really evident online. And there was this, there was a peak of people being like, are you not going to talk about politics anymore? Or like, what are we doing? And I didn't know. I was still like, for right now. And I honestly kind of thought it was, God's just going to ask me to put this down until like December, probably. Like, we're going to take things slow for December and then I'll jump back into it. Like, I kept and thenning, making my own plans, trying to have my own control of the situation. And what ended up happening was God just continued to extend this season and show me that my work, and I have shared this publicly, like my work, the most important work for me right now is my children, my home, and my healing. Because if I had kept going at the pace that I was going at, it wasn't going to be pretty. And I have generational evidence for what that would have done to me. And as much as that's not what I want for my life, it was what I was opting into and the road that I was choosing to walk. And I also think that I was going to start running out of time. I was going to start running out of time with my children, with myself, with my body. And so I know that people miss my political content. I definitely do sometimes. That's so reflexive for me. Like, I can jump back into that so easily, even having been out of it for 6 months. I could jump back into it today and jump back into the same exact rat race and style of content, and it would honestly probably feel easier than some of the content and things that God's asking me to do in this season. And I had to become really okay with kind of disappointing people and maybe even feeling like I was letting them down. And there have been like a handful of people that have voiced that they're like disappointed in me, or, you know, disappointed is just the word that keeps coming up. They're disappointed that I'm not doing this, or even that like it kind of like seems like a cop out or whatever. That's been really great practice in letting go of fear of man and letting it be what it is, and trusting that my obedience to God is significantly more important to me than keeping some people on the internet happy. I had to be okay with disappointing people so that I could be what my kids need and what I need and what God was asking me to be. And now you kind of know like the whole story of how we got there. And I, without trying to sound any kind of way, I've just changed so much in the last 6 months. I feel like I've changed in the last 6 months how much I would have comfortably changed in years. It's like God put me on some kind of fast track in August, and which is more than 6 months, but it's fine. It's been so painful and scary and felt like things were flying by me a lot of the time. But the fruit, right? If the beginning of 2025, my hope was let there be fruit, the fruit is so worth it. And I definitely have my moments where I'm like, have I lost my edge? I kind of hope so. Isn't that maybe some of the refining is refining some of the edginess out? The need to fight and debate, like that was constant for me. And now it's much more dull. It's something that rises up sometimes. And there's righteous anger. And there are times to answer what's being said, but not that being my reflex or my default. And look, like there's still moments where Jeremy has to listen to me rant about things, but God is super explicit. This isn't like get it out, but not publicly. I don't like that still. And like, there are still some things happening in the world and in culture and online that I have to battle for obedience in, that I want to break what God has asked of me and let it rip. But I've experienced what disobedient does so intimately in the last year that I'm kind of like, couldn't, like, yes, I want to, but I really, really don't. I really, really don't. And there's this really great song, What a God. And there's a line in it that says, if the highest place I reach is at your feet, then I've done it all. And that's really become the cry of my heart. You know, if I stayed in the political content world, would I have grown more than I have in the last year? For sure. Would I be making more money? Definitely. Would I have higher engagement rate? Absolutely. But it was keeping me from the absolute highest work, which is the ability to sit at the feet of God and be his daughter. And I really feel like I'm just getting started. You know, I've only, what, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, 7-8 months into that experience after a lifetime of fighting and running and pushing and disobeying. And so I'm going to sit at his feet for a little while. I don't know how long. I don't know. I'm that door is open for me. God has it shut. I promise the second he asks me to step back into that, I will. But my directive right now is to sit at his feet and be a mom and shepherd other people that are doing the same. And I've gotten a lot of really great feedback from y'all about God asking you to do the same, and that me kind of doing it publicly has welcomed you into doing it as well. And that's the best thing that I can do right now. So that's the story of how I went from being a full-time Politico to I don't know, whatever I am right now. A cozy Christian content creator that loves Jesus and her family and loves you guys and just wants to be obedient with what I have. But yeah, love you.